Welcome back to Black and Brown Crowns, the show where beautiful Black and Brown women speak about their career experiences. I'm Cheyenne, your host, and today we'll be speaking about what it's like to become a psychotherapist with Miss Jasmine. Hi, Miss Jasmine, how are you?
I'm good, Miss Cheyenne. How are you?
I'm doing well. New day, new start, new interview. But thank you for joining me today, and I hope you all get all the information that you need in order to learn about what it's like to be a psychotherapist. So with that said, let's get started. Did you always know you wanted to be a psychotherapist? How did that come about?
Absolutely not. So I went to a high school where a lot of my peers, at least the peers that I hung out with, didn't have a lot of aspirations to go to college. So it wasn't on the forefront of my mind. And I think like only one other person in my family at the time had went to college. So it was kind of like, I graduated high school and I'm done with like school. I never have to go again. And then my mom was like, psych, you're actually going to go to college and you're going to go to the one that gives you the most money. And you're either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, wow, both of those things sound really bad, but I don't want to argue with people. So I guess I'll be a doctor. So I ended up going to this school in upstate New York in my hometown. I had a scholarship that was called an HEOP scholarship, so Higher Education Opportunity Program. It was for youth that basically have the grades but didn't have the funds to go to that college. So I got that academic scholarship and I majored in pre-med. And I took chemistry and I was like, this is so hard. I really don't want to do this anymore. Intro to sociology, it was like the easiest class that I could take as an elective. So I was like, let me just get in and get out as quickly as possible. And I ended up falling in love with sociology. So I ended up changing my major from pre-med to sociology. And I got my undergraduate degree in sociology. And then as time went on, I started working in the sociology field. And then I started working with communities that needed a lot of mental health support. And that's how I found out, like, wow, I really want to be the person that can provide this mental health support to these people. So I kind of like fell into it. It wasn't something that I always knew I wanted to do. So I got that academic scholarship and I went on and got an internship my senior year of undergrad working at a juvenile detention center, which really like put the stamp on it for me as something that I like work that I wanted to do. And at the juvenile detention center, I worked as a recreational therapist. So I was like, this is so much fun. So helping people like work through their traumas and like just have therapeutic things that they can do, but through having fun. So like games and like field trips to like hiking or bowling or things like that. But without the HEOP program, I think I probably would have never went to college because it really provided me with a platform to pay for college.
I think that I've never heard of a program like that. And I think if there were more programs like that, or if there were programs that were accessible to everyone and everyone knew about it, then maybe more people will go into college or have the opportunity to start something new within their lives, whether if it's a new career or a new job interest or whatever the case may be. Like I said, I didn't know about that. For me, I got out of high school, went straight into college, fell in love with psych at college, and then I never went back. But those types of programs are very much needed. And if they are out there, not a lot of people know about it. Or if they are out there and maybe a lot of people know about it, they're not being talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't talked about for me until I applied to my school and they were like, hey, this is something that you qualify for. I think high school, it was definitely not something that was ever talked about, which is probably whether if it was a conscious or a subconscious like deterrent of like me saying I'm not gonna go to college, or it being like I guess an unconscious decision of like college is an opportunity for me, but because finances wasn't something that was easily available to us, or money wasn't easily available to us at that time, especially in the way that like how much college can cost sometimes, I definitely wasn't thinking like this is something my family's going to be able to afford. So I was like, yeah, this is probably not for me, right? And then falling
Yeah.
into that program made it much more of a realistic option, obviously, because I graduated, thank God. But it definitely is not something that's talked about, and it should definitely be talked about more. I don't know where you can find information about it. I don't know if the program still exists, but I know that when I was in that program, it was called HEOP, Higher Education Opportunity Program.
Thank you for that. And hopefully it's still out there, or it might be under a different name. So definitely, if you said in the New York area.
For private schools and public schools, they had different names. For private schools, I know it was HEOP. I think it was EOP or EEOP for public institutions.
Okay. So that was just a little clarification. But again, if you're in the New York area, definitely check those opportunities out if it's there. It again may be under a different name, but at least you know that there's a resource out there for people who may need a little bit more funds when it comes to college. How did you know that psychotherapy specifically was the route you wanted to take?
I want to say it was when I was working with a preventative program in New York City. And essentially, my job there was to ensure that, well, let me back up. So, a lot of our clients were referrals from the New York City Child Protective Services Agency. In New York City, it's called ACS, Administration of Children's Services. Um, and we would get referrals from that Child Protective Agency, like people that maybe had like abuse or neglect cases, any type of cases where safety was a concern. Once that CPS program was like, hey, you guys are in the clear, we're going to close your case, they would then refer us to our preventative program. And the preventative program essentially provided therapeutic services, but our main priority was to ensure that the home was safe before backing out. So safety meant making sure that they were connected with like educational needs or housing needs, like any type of needs that needed to be met, making sure they were connected with these spaces. But I found that a lot of the time when I would be working with these families or these youth or these parents, I would be doing a lot of therapeutic work through, like, I am not able to make sure that my kid gets to school on time because I'm in an abusive relationship and my husband or boyfriend or partner will not allow me to like bring my kid to school. They force me to like make breakfast or something, right? That's just a one of many examples. And a lot of the times I would find myself in a situation where I would be providing that person with therapeutic support and essentially some sort of counseling or therapy. And that is what I noticed I like the most about that job. And I was like, okay, I like this job. It's benefiting me right now, but I know I need to get to the next step so that I can focus on the thing that I like the most, which was the counseling part. And I knew that I had to go and get some type of degree in some sort of psychotherapy so that I can do that moving forward. So again, I kind of just like stumbled into this. It was just like figuring it out as I went.
Do you have to have a degree for psychotherapy, or can you, like, if you're switching from a career now and you want to go into psychotherapy, do you have to have like a bachelor's degree, or will an associate degree suffice? Like, how does that come about?
So you have to practice psychotherapy. And I practice in the state of New York, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and the state of Maryland. So to practice, I can't speak for other states. I can only speak for the states I'm licensed to practice in. But to practice in those states, you need to have a master's in counseling in some sort. So whether if that's social work, or I think it's professional counseling or marriage and family therapy, and I'm sure there's another one that I'm just not thinking about right now, but you have to have a master's of some sort in one of those realms. And then you have to be licensed by the state that you are practicing in or want to practice in, so that you can officially practice psychotherapy. So you can't practice it without, I think they have a program where it's like a bachelor's in social work, how that works, if you can practice psychotherapy or not, I'm not quite sure. But I'm gonna go with the side of like, you probably need to have a master's. At least that's the route that I took. But I know you cannot for sure with an associate, and I know you cannot for sure without any type of degree in counseling. I know there's some people out there who do coaching, um, which many people consider it similar to psychotherapy. I'm not familiar with coaching, so I can't say if it is or it isn't, but I know that to practice psychotherapy, it has to be a master's in social work, professional counseling, or marriage and family therapy, or another one that I'm not thinking of.
And you mentioned that you were licensed in 3 areas. What does it mean to be licensed?
to to be licensed means that you sat and took basically a state board examination, saying that you know all of the information that you need to know around like social work. So I have my master's in social work, so I took the state board exam for social work. So basically everything I learned throughout my master's program, I sat for an exam, which I guess would be considered like a comps exam, where it's basically comprehensive everything you've learned over the time in your master's program, and it's basically thrown at you on a test. um I want to say the test was maybe like, I want to say like 180 or 170 questions, and it focused on like mental health diagnosis, safety, risk assessment, medication, and some organization stuff.
It doesn't sound too bad, but you have to be licensed in order to practice. Just as a clarification, because I know that with counseling in the program that I am, you have to be licensed within the state of Virginia to counsel anyone with a mental health disorder.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So, kind of to switch gears a little bit, what are your typical work days or work hours? How do they look?
So right now I'm employed as a psychotherapist with a private practice. So pretty much I'm a therapist. So textbook or therapy that you would, I guess, think or see like on TV, right? So it's like the therapist is sitting in the chair and then you're sitting on the couch, right? And then you're talking about all your problems or whatever, right? It's not how TV makes it out to be, but if there's a way to explain it so people have a picture in their mind, that's what I do, right? But obviously, because of the current pandemic, I'm not doing it in an office. I'm doing it in my home, and I'm doing it over the computer, which is considered telehealth. And so the same way that we're meeting right now is the same way I would essentially meet with my clients. Um, I usually see clients for like 30 to 55 minutes, and I see roughly about sometimes between like 5 to like 8 or 9 people a day. Um, there's some people that I meet and we talk about how it's hard to navigate living at home with their parents because of the pandemic. Some people, we talk about more in-depth things or more serious things like suicidal ideations or severe mental illness stuff. Each person is different. So I don't talk about the same things over and over again, but essentially my job is to help these people navigate these spaces that they're having difficulty navigating on their own.
That kind of sounds a little, not gonna lie, it sounds a little taxing, like on your mind. So how do you kind of like rejuvenate after having serious conversations with clients?
It definitely can be very emotionally taxing. Um, I know that especially now because like everything's done on the computer, it's like Zoom burnout, I think it's called now. Um, so I definitely feel that on top of like the emotional taxing stuff that I'm doing, just like talking with people, right, and hearing their stories, their traumas. Um, I think the best way that I try to like take care of myself is making sure that I'm practicing self-care. So I always make sure I have one day a week where I do either like absolutely nothing or I'm doing things that I want to do, right? So if it's like I'm binge watching HGTV all day, or maybe I'm like, you know, I'm gonna go get my nails done today, or I'm gonna go to the supermarket and buy something that I actually really want to eat, or try a new recipe that I really want to try, or read books. I don't know if the listeners will be able to see me, but I have a bookshelf behind me. So like it's full of books, right? So making sure that I'm doing things that make me feel good so that I can have time not only for my brain to rest and my eyes to rest from looking at a computer all day, but also just so that I can feel better about myself and take time away from like all of the emotional work and trauma work that I do.
Can you say that this job can interfere with your personal life? Because you did mention that you have to take self-care because it can be mentally taxing, but if you have like a family that you have to take care of and you just came home from work, how is the how can you take your job, like how can you leave your job at the door when you come home, if that makes sense? Like what is the barrier between your work and your life balance, so it does not intervene with your personal life?
So that is very hard, and it's taken me a lot of time to master that. And I think it's fair to say that I'm still working on it. Um, but like, so I'll give it to you like two examples. So like, obviously pre-corona world was very different from the world that we're living in now, right? And in that pre-corona world, I was going to the office. So I was leaving my house every day, going to my office, and then coming back home, right? So I had a physical commute, a tangible thing that I could say, you know, work is work, right? Where now, post-corona world, or in the midst of corona world, I'm working at home. So it's literally only a door that separates me from the rest of like my world, right? Um, and I think that the thing that I did to kind of like let go or like separate work from like personal life pre-corona was on my way home from work, I would call my grandmother and vent about like how I felt, right? So it's like, oh, I had a really long day, I'm so tired, or she'd tell me about her day, or calling my best friend and listening to everything that's going on in her life, or telling her everything that's going on in my life, or even calling my partner and talking about our days, or coming home and talking to my partner about my day, or listening to him about his day. And I think now it's definitely harder to do that, where before it was just like, okay, I left work and I can physically leave work at work, where now it's like I'm on my lunch break and I just like turn my camera off, right? Or I just end the call with my client and I'm still sitting in my office, or I'm just gonna walk down the hall to my bedroom or go downstairs to my couch and relax. Um, so now it's a little harder because there's no physical separation. But I want to say that now the best way that I can do that is by like literally like saying, all right, I'm done for the day, putting my computer on sleep mode, going downstairs and starting dinner, or watching TV of some sort, or making plans to do something with my partner, like, hey, let's go to the store, or let's go grab dinner from somewhere, right? So that this way I can have that like physical separation. Um, but it's definitely harder now because of the world we're living in, where we're forced to be at home.
On the topic of COVID, you already explained that it went from, being in person to basically everything being online. How else has COVID affected your career, like the career field of psychotherapy?
Um, it's a good question. So telehealth is the platform that we're using now to essentially provide people with therapeutic services. Telehealth just means that we're essentially doing things virtually. So over a video call, phone call, whatever. I primarily practice over video calls. I only practice over video calls. Um, but telehealth existed prior to COVID. And I think it kind of just like blew up when COVID happened, because a lot of therapists, psychotherapists didn't have any other way to practice. And I want to say now, like looking back, like I had been asked, like, hey, do you want to practice like telehealth? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, this is not something that I want to do, because you can miss a lot of cues, right? So it's like I can only see people from like maybe like their shoulders up or their chest up. And like if someone is like fiddling with their fingers or tapping their foot anxiously or something, I can miss that as a therapist because I can't see all of those things happening. I also don't have control over their environment the way that I did when we were in the office, right? So in my office, I can make sure that like that we're in a quiet space, that no one else can hear you, that you have access to tissues and the candy that I keep on my little coffee table, right? And there's a window in there, so I know that you're getting sunlight when you're in my office, right? Where in telehealth, I don't have that control, right? So you may be in a car, you may be in a room or and sharing that room with like a sibling or something. So you might not feel comfortable talking about all the things you want to talk about. So, and it hasn't, telehealth and I guess Corona, right? COVID hasn't stopped me from practicing, but it has definitely forced me to be creative and alter the way that I practice, especially with my clients, being that they're at home now and everything that comes with being at home.
Do you think that with telehealth, it might stay this way for whether if it's therapy or counseling, what have you, it might stay online, or do you see it coming back maybe like 5 years down the road?
I see it coming back because the practice that I'm with now is to transition back into the office, but those plans are dependent on what happens with COVID, the vaccine, and the world, how the world is going to react to all of these things and how the therapists, including myself, feel about going back into the office. I know for me, speaking for myself, I don't foresee me going back to the office, probably not in the next year, just because I don't personally foresee COVID ending within the next year, just because I guess my hopefulness or my optimism around COVID has been tainted, like as it has for everyone else, where it's like when it first happened, we're like, oh, this is just gonna be a month or 2 months, right? And the next thing you know, here we are a year later. So I'm not quite sure, but if I had to guess, I probably would say personally, I don't foresee myself going back within the next year. So.
Yeah, it definitely has took a number, especially on my program, having to go from in person to strictly online. Although there are some classes that are in person and I miss that, but me trying to be self and health conscious, I'm kind of now, although I don't like it, I'm kind of now like slowly just accepting that my program is going to be online, although I didn't really sign up for it, but you know, whatever. Did you have any people who you looked up to in the field that kind of helped you move along as a psychotherapist, like a mentor or something?
Yeah, but I definitely didn't find those people until I want to say I definitely didn't have them in undergrad. Because like I said, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing in undergrad. I was just winging it. Um, and my family kind of didn't know what I was doing in undergrad because they were just like, just go and finish, because they didn't do it. And then in my master's program, I want to say that I kind of was just like out there by myself. There wasn't really anybody guiding me through that. My family was just like, you do it, you're smart, go ahead, go. And a lot of I don't think I have any friends, or at that time I didn't have any friends that were in social work or in the counseling field at all. I want to say it wasn't maybe until I started working at the preventative program where I had one person, her name was Maureen Drakowski, and she was not a woman of color, but she was someone who really like pushed me along and was like, you know, you can do this. I can see you doing this. Like, here's how you apply to your master's program. This is what it's like if you decide to take the licensing exam. And eventually when I left that job, I kept in contact with her, and she was great. But then I went on to find another mentor, and she was a woman of color. Her name was Blondell, and I'm still in contact with her. She's a lovely woman. I want to say that she is KSAC certified. So she is certified in treating individuals that have substance use concerns. And she was not familiar with the social work field, but she was someone who like kept her foot like on my neck and was like, you know, keep going forward, don't stop. And was like, you know, if you find yourself between like a rock and a hard place, reach out to me and we can figure it out the best that we can. She wasn't someone who was doing the same exact things as me, but she was someone who was definitely a support for me.
Speaking of women of color in, you know, in professional environments, did you have to find any strategies to fit within those environments that would help you feel comfortable in those environments?
Yes. So a lot of, I would say in the, at least in my experience, I've learned that the counseling field is, and I would say that that's very different now because I'm in the DMV area, which is highly way more diverse than um, upstate New York was, and maybe even New York City was for me career wise. Um, and I want to say that so majority of my like therapeutic experience, counseling experience was all done in New York State. Um, I've only been in the DMV area for maybe about like a year and a half now. Um, and I want to say that in New York State, it was definitely harder to navigate that space because there were so many little women of color in that field. And I definitely had to learn how to develop, I guess I would say, like thicker skin, not let people get to me as much and not let people get under my skin as much, and learn how to navigate a space that wasn't built for people that look like me, and wasn't inviting to people that looked like me. And I want to say that coming to the DMV area, that has that it in particular has definitely changed for me. I would say that it's way more this career is way more diverse here, and it's more, at least in my experience, it has been more inviting, more sensitive to me and everything that comes with me. And I want to say that when I was in New York, it was definitely hard to navigate, to say the least.
Did anything surprise you, whether if it was moving from New York and having that atmosphere to moving into the DMV area and having this atmosphere?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting for it to be so different. I think I kind of was just like, I guess, conditioned to always be in like defense mode at work, not with my clients, but just like with my colleagues. And so like when I came to the DMV area, I was like in defense mode naturally, just because like that's the mode that I've always had to be in. And then coming here, it was kind of just like a shell shock. So it's like my superiors at the private practice are not women of color, but they are very supportive. They are very caring, and they are just like open to hearing anything and everything that I have to say, which was not the I guess experience that I had in New York. Majority of the time, it was not the experience that I had in New York. And I think that it was like a shell shock for me coming to the DMV area, where it's like, whoa, like, so you care about what I have to say and you respect my opinions and you like are okay with me saying no. Like, whoa, this was like something completely different to me. And I know that it's probably not the same for everyone, right? It might be unique just to my private practice, or it could be like this everywhere in the DMV area. I don't know. I haven't left my private practice because they're so great. Um, but I know that that was like the biggest like shock for me. It was like that they were like, and still are, super supportive about all of my opinions, my requests, like anything. If I was like, you know, I needed to take a month off from work and I can't tell you why, they'd be like, cool, hit us up when you come back. So in New York, it would definitely, that would not be okay or the case. And I would say that that has been like the biggest difference for me.
That's actually really funny. Although like it's good to find a place where you feel comfortable, especially as a woman of color, because sometimes when we enter spaces, it's like, oh, they already have their perceived notion of who they think we are. And at least within the DMV area, I can't, like you said, I can't speak for everybody's experience, but for me, there are times when I would go into a space and they're like, oh. But then there are times when they're like, oh, okay, like she's cool, it's this, it's that, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's really nice to know, especially again within this area, that there are places and spaces for us to enter, and it's okay. It's okay to have, a really good time with your colleagues. It's okay to maybe sit down and cry with your colleagues after having, a long day at work, and trying to express that, that there's a sisterhood, there's a bond between us all. Like, yes, this is my skin color, but get to know me as a person.
Absolutely.
Within the DMV area, because of how comfortable you feel, what are some of the rewarding aspects of the job?
Helping people. I think the most rewarding aspect is helping people meet their goals. So essentially, when you start therapy, most therapists should ask you, like, what are your goals here? Like, what do you want to achieve, like, out of coming here, right? Like, I want to help you get whatever you want to get out of this. And at least that's what I ask my clients. And so in the beginning, we identify these goals, and those goals can be, I want to be able to better manage my anxiety. I want to have less frequent suicidal thoughts, or I just want to be better at getting up on time and going to work, right? Whatever it is, you identify it, and I help you work towards that. And the most rewarding thing for me is helping those people meet their goals and whatever that goal is. And I can't always do that, and that's okay too. But if I can help them get closer to it in any shape or form, that's the best part of it for me.
On that topic, actually, what is something that you wish you knew before that you know now?
Something that I knew now that I wish I knew before. I wish that I said no more often to situations that I felt uncomfortable in. So whether if it was from like working with specific clients that I felt like, my experience or my education is not sufficient for this client's needs, and they maybe need someone who is better equipped or has better tools. I wish I said no to certain jobs where they weren't beneficial not only to me as a person, but also not beneficial to my mental health. I think that is the biggest one. So a lot of times we say yes to things because we're like, being a woman of color, right? We not only are we a woman, but we're also of color, right? We're Black women, and we have to be like 10 times better than everybody in that room. I think a lot of times I took on like jobs, or I worked with certain clients that made me feel uncomfortable, or made it harder for me to navigate my own mental health. And I want to say that I should have said no to those things because I should have made myself a priority. And I think that if there's anything that the listeners are taking away from today, I want to say it's that, to always make yourself a priority in every single thing that you do, because the only person who's going to look out for you is you. And if you're not putting yourself first, why will anybody else? So I wish I put myself first more often.
I was actually going to ask you if there was any advice for anyone coming into this field, but you already answered that.
Yeah, it's definitely prioritize yourself in every shape or form. Prioritize yourself in your education, prioritize yourself in your career, prioritize yourself in your mental health, your personal life, your professional life, whatever it is, prioritize yourself. Because if you're always prioritizing yourself, you're always going to end up on top. And you're always going to feel good about the space that you're at, and that you're in the space that you're in.
That's really good advice, especially going into school, because look, you have to prioritize yourself when those exams start hitting, when the papers start hitting, you have that 11:59 deadline, like you got to figure out that balance. But even like organizing and things like that, because again, those deadlines, they come up real quick.
Especially if you're not prioritizing yourself, they're gonna sneak up on you because you've been maybe prioritizing, like, I don't know, the things that you had to do at your job for your boss, and you were like, you know what, I'll do that paper later, and then it's 11:29 and that paper's due at 11:59 and you weren't prioritizing yourself, right? You're gonna find yourself in a situation you don't want to be in.
Oh my goodness, I've definitely found myself in those situations, but again, came out on top. Where can viewers find more information about being a psychotherapist?
More information about being a psychotherapist. You can always check out your state's website for. I'm going to speak for social work because I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm a social worker by trade. So if you were trying to be a psychotherapist but want to take the route of social work, check out your state websites. I believe for Maryland, it is through the Department of Health. And I want to say it's also the same for the District of Columbia and also New York State. You can also check out the ASWB website, Association for Social Work Boards. And you can also check out, there was another website and it just like slipped my mind. Can't think of it, but if it comes back to me, I'll let you know. Okay. You can definitely check out those websites about being a psychotherapist. Also, Psychology Today, that's the website. Psychology Today is my go-to. Not only can you find mental health services on there, but they also are a good resource for providing people with information that is clinically based, clinically backed as well. So they have a lot of articles on there around like mental health, psychology, psychotherapy, you name it, anything related to the mental health field, it's on there, and it's written by people with counseling or psychology degrees. Psychology Today is the website.
I actually use that for some of my papers, not even gonna lie. It helps. It definitely helps. You said that you were a social work by trade. What does that mean for viewers?
So I have my master's in social work. So you can be a psychotherapist by getting your master's in professional counseling or marriage and family therapy or another master's program that I'm not thinking of right now. But I have my master's in social work. So when you go to school for social work, you can either get your bachelor's in social work or your master's in social work. And when I got my master's in social work, you have to pick a concentration. My concentration was health and mental health. So that means that I took a more clinical track. So that means that I was going to go on or had aspirations to go on for psychotherapy or a psychotherapist track. And I'm still a psychotherapist, but I'm also a social worker. So that means that my credentials at the end of my name are LMSW, Licensed Master's Social Worker.
Thank you for that. And also, just for viewers that may not know, what is the difference between psychotherapy, I guess regular therapy, like counseling, or psychiatry? What is the difference between those three fields?
Yeah. So psychiatry is basically medication. So for someone to become a psychiatrist, they have to also be a medical doctor. So they go through like pre-med training. They go through like basically all of the training that a doctor goes through. And then when it comes for them to do their residency, they do it in some sort of psychiatric field. And they specialize in prescribing medication for mental health disorders. Psychotherapists and most counselors cannot prescribe medication. you have to have different credentials and education for that. Psychotherapists differ from counselors because we have the clinical training that counselors don't. And that's not to say professional counselors don't have clinical training, because they do. It's just different than if you're providing counseling and psychotherapy. Psychotherapy really focuses on like the clinical aspect of it. And psychotherapy also has a lot of evidence-based treatment models or treatment approaches that are used to treat the individual. So some of those treatment models, can, just to name a few, are like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. And counselors can use those things, but essentially psychotherapists have been trained and licensed and certified to use these things.
Again, thank you for the clarification, because I know when I was coming into my psych program at during undergrad, I didn't know the difference. I just thought therapy was therapy, or psychology, psychiatry. But I knew that psychiatry dealt more with medicine. I didn't know you had to go to like medical school in order to prescribe medicine. There is now a way that you can be a psychologist, I believe, and still prescribe medicine, but there are specific states that only allow that. So it's not across the board. But if that's something that people are interested in, I would definitely say Google it and see like what are the qualifications for that, because again, it's not across the board in every state. I believe it's only 3 states that allow that. So yeah, definitely check that out if that's something that you're interested in. But to wrap this whole interview up, and to wrap up your whole career experience, I call this Shy's 3. How would you describe your career experience in 3 words?
That's hard. In 3 words, it's been challenging, it's been rewarding, and it's been introspective. So not only has it challenged me, it's also rewarded me throughout my experience, but it's also forced me to do a lot of like looking in and reflecting on my own, to make sure that I am the best psychotherapist that I can be for the clients that I serve.
Thank you. I know that, at least for me, counseling can be, like you said, challenging. But when you think of introspection, you have to think of yourself, and that comes in with the job. You're helping people for how many ever hours of the day, and then you have to have that barrier between, again, work and personal life. And not everybody takes the time to, sit back and think about themselves when it comes to whether work in general or working as a counselor. And that's something that we have to learn, because again, throughout this interview, it's mentally taxing to hear trauma stories or hear stories that you haven't been a part of, but you're trying to help fix something that is bothering someone. And it's not like fix like a definite fix, but try to help them cope with whatever happened to them, maybe years ago, maybe recently, maybe right now. It's especially when it comes to the counseling and client relationship. If the counseling and client relationship isn't working, then there's a problem. And then you also have to take that into consideration and take a step back and think about yourself. How can I help this client a little more than what I'm doing now? Like, in having that conversation with the client as well. So although I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm going the counseling route, I can say that the 3 words that you gave, I can already see within myself, especially from my background as being an RA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any different 3 words that I could better use to describe this field. And I would say that I've definitely learned, or at least experienced, each of those 3 characteristics, even in my master's program, similar to how you said that you are. I would say it was definitely more of the challenging than it was rewarding and introspective then, right? But I definitely experienced all three and still am to this very day. And I'm sure that I will continue as long as I am a psychotherapist.
Well, on that note, I want to thank Miss Jasmine for joining me. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and to get updated videos, and also follow us on social media. Thank you again, Miss Jasmine.
Thank you.